is a really important our topic's a really important one today. Social media and children's mental health. I know this is on the minds of many of you. It gets a lot of attention in the media these days, and there's so much of it to examine and to understand. We selected this topic not only because of its prevalence right now, but because it was a topic that our network, you folks, identified as something you wanted to learn more about. And so here we are, social media and children's mental health. So we're going to tackle this big topic in 4 sections that you see here on the screen. First of all, data. We'll start by looking at the data and hearing what research tells us about social media and kids. Then we'll move on to a youth panel discussion. We'll hear from a panel of high school students. Youth themselves are always experts on social media, and they're going to tell us, how they engage with it, what their concerns are, and what we should know. Then we're going to speak with Tina Crave. Tina is the director of the Waterford Community Health Foundation, and Tina is going to talk about reclaiming life in the real world and how to balance social media, right-size it into your life.
So good, to have.
And then we will, on the 4th section of this is that we will talk about cell phones in schools. We're going to wrap up this section with hearing from a school that has an away for the day policy on cell phone use to learn about how they implemented it, how they staged it in, and how they feel that it's working. So let's get going and hear from our OCMH researcher, Amy Marsman, who's going to share some of the data on children's mental health, as well as some research and recommendations on social media. Amy?
Thank you so much, Linda. Good morning, everybody. The data on sorry, Karen, can you advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. Some of this data may be familiar to some of the folks in the room today, but I want to just establish sort of a baseline around youth mental health data and what we know about how kids are doing in Wisconsin. So it may be new to some of you, it may be a refresher for others. But the data on youth mental health can be very alarming. It can be discouraging, but we feel it's important to ground our discussion in data. And so we're starting this way. And I will also get to some research-based recommendations toward the end of my time, which will hopefully be a little bit more uplifting. But to start, we are looking at the key facts that our office tracks. We pay a lot of attention to anxiety rates, and you'll see here that over half of high school students report being anxious, so much so that it affects their daily life. Over a third of high school students in Wisconsin say they feel sad and hopeless nearly every day for the past 2 weeks, which is a marker for depression. Only about a quarter of our students are getting sufficient sleep, and about a quarter of girls have reported that they seriously considered suicide in the last year. 21% of high school students in Wisconsin report that they have self-harmed. So we know from survey data here in Wisconsin that high school students are struggling. And based on this most recent available data, we continue to see increased rates of mental health concerns among all kids, but especially girls and LGBTQ youth. So while these data are based on Wisconsin high school students, we know from other research that the youth mental health crisis is affecting all ages. It's not specific to high schoolers. It's impacting elementary to college age children. And our office tracks up to 26-year-olds. So we do keep an eye on older teens and young adults. We also know from other data sources that are not self-reported data that these data are, or that these results are in line with what other surveys or measures are showing. And that is all that the youth mental health crisis is continuing. We also know that the situation has been building for many years, predating the pandemic, which certainly made things worse. but we see that there have been 10-year trends that have shown this increase over that time, or I should say, a decline in mental health, but increasing declines. So there's been an over a 40% increase in depression and teens seriously considering suicide, and there's been over a 20% increase in self-harm rates. In Wisconsin, only 1 in 4 teens gets sufficient sleep. I mentioned that in the first slide, 26%, so about a quarter, they sleep an average of 8 hours on a average school night. This too has fallen steadily over the last 10 years. Half of high school students also say that they are on a device after midnight between the hours of 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. Again, that's over half of high school students say they're on a device between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. This is really alarming to us because getting sufficient sleep is truly foundational to mental health, and I'm highlighting it because sleep is also a part of the screen time conversation that we'll be having today. Um, so we know that for every expert, whether they're a pediatrician, a sleep researcher, an educator, a parent, they will tell you that sleep is foundational to their mental well-being, and that if you're going to prioritize something, many of these experts say sleep tops that priority list. So the recommended a minimum amounts of sleep are actually a range given what your child's age is. For school age kids who are 6 to 13 years old, they should be getting between 9 and 11 hours of sleep every night. For teenagers who are 14 to 17 years old, they should be getting a minimum of 8 hours, but between 8 and 10 hours of sleep every night. And then parents need 7 to 9 hours every night. We can't forget about parents because their mental health impacts their children's mental health, and modeling healthy habits and coping skills is essential. Another concerning trend is the decline in school belonging over the years. After sleep, one of the most protective factors is a sense of belonging, and school belonging is tracked in our high school data from the YRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We know that a sense of belonging is consistently linked with better mental health. So our office pays a lot of attention to this metric. We know from research that youth who are socially connected, who feel that they belong, they do better both in attending school, they have better academic outcomes and achievement, and of course, they have better mental health. So it's a really powerful protective factor. The data on school belonging rates in Wisconsin are discouraging. Over the last 10 years, it has fallen. The rate of kids who feel like they belong at their school has declined by 20 percentage points in 10 years. And so now, currently, about half of high school students say they do not belong. They feel that they do not belong at their high school, the place where they spend the majority of their time. And unfortunately, the outcomes are full of disparities for our students of color. When it comes to school belonging, less than half of Hispanic, Black, and multiracial kids say they feel that they belong at their school. These trends have some wondering if it's simply harder to be a teenager today. And Pew Research Center had done a study. This is a national study. It's not specific to Wisconsin. And when parents and teens were asked, compared to 20 years ago, do you think being a teenager today is harder, easier, or about the same? And nearly 7 in 10 parents said it was harder, 69%, while 44% of teens say it's harder. Um, Only a few say it's easier to be a teen today, 15% of parents, 12% of teens. And of course, a large portion of the teens don't know because they weren't around 20 years ago. So 39% of teens said, we just don't know. Yeah. Then when they asked about the reason for it being harder, the vast majority of parents attribute this to a digital reason. Social media specifically and technology generally were the top two answers that parents gave. But also the internet and smartphones were also cited. Just want to note that 16% of parents said the reason it's harder to be a teen today was due to more pressures and increased expectations. So that was a pretty low portion of the parents. Could everyone please mute their mics? Thank you so much. When they asked the teens why it's harder to be a teenager today, about half as many said it was due to a digital reason. The most common reason that teens gave was increased pressures and expectations, twi- twice the rate of what parents thought. So there's a big perception gap. And Karen had mentioned our children's mental health materials. In that suite of materials, we have some graphics on the top stressors facing teens. And in that piece, which is taken from Wisconsin Youth from the summit a couple of weeks ago, 97% said academic pressure was the top concern, the top stressor. So it's important to note that in a number of surveys, both nationally and some surveys and asking that our office has done in listening sessions, that teens say this pressure at school and achievement culture were their biggest concerns. So, what are kids doing online? The Pew Research asks, where are kids going and where are they spending their time online? So, again, this is national survey data. We see that most teens use, we know that most teens use social media and have a smartphone, nearly all. And nearly half say that they're online almost constantly. The main draws for teenagers are YouTube, first and foremost, TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. And to be clear, all of these are social media sites. Video gaming is also considered social media, though I don't believe they asked about video gaming in this survey. But just so folks know, when we talk about digital media, we're including TV, social media, video streaming, and the usual suspects, which we see here. So I'm going to get to the spoiler, which is that there are pros and cons of kids being online. Research is ongoing, especially into the risks that social media poses. The debate has not been settled in scientific or academic circles, but we do have some consensus on what the main pros and cons are for kids. Briefly, some of the benefits of social media include connecting with friends, coordinating meetups, and coordinating in-person activities. It helps teens to schedule themselves. It helps with communications, and for kids to find their community online, especially those who don't find community offline. It can be really helpful. It can be, they describe it as a lifeline. Um, Kids also like exploring new skills and learning new things to connect to their passions and maybe launch a passion project. And then, of course, just for plain fun and entertainment value, just like the rest of us. In terms of the risks of social media use and youth, as I said, there are debates as to whether and to how much social media is impacting youth mental health. But we do know from research so far that heavier users have a higher risk for anxiety and depression. And there's a lot of correlational research tying screen time to mental health problems, and researchers are looking into whether causation is present or not. Um, there's a lot of alarm over the content and algorithms that are targeting kids and the lack of guardrails. So there's also a body of research around what are effective guardrails and accountability. So while the research and debate continues, parents are largely on the hook for monitoring kids' social media use. And many experts here advise that parents are a guide alongside their child. We need to help guide kids on how to positively use media and technology. Technology, smartphones, social media are here to stay. We have to learn to live with them. And so their advice is we need to teach our kids and ourselves how to live with this amount of technology in a healthy and balanced way. So the emphasis a bit less on when do I give my child an iPad or a smartwatch or a phone, and more of an emphasis on how will they be using it and how can we on ramp them to this new device. As a parent myself, it has helped me to remember what those pros and cons are, to remember that there are risks, but there are also rewards. and that it's an ongoing process of guiding yourself and guiding your child into a positive and more balanced use. Many experts say the app being used is a little less important than the dialogue between you and your child. And so, really connecting with your kids in your life, whether it's in your family, in your classroom, in your organization, connecting with kids in your life is the doorway into a conversation. And you want to keep that door always open so that if they do see something um, alarming or inappropriate, or they don't know how to handle a relationship that is playing out online, that they can come to you. To recap some of the benefits that we have just touched on, there the main one is hopefully that is a connection point. So connecting with friends and family who may not live nearby. Um, and sometimes this is the only method of communication for some kids. But also, social media allows for this creative self expression, the pursuit of learning something new and interesting that is driven by the child's interests. And it can be their choice and how they want to explore a project, which is really beneficial to their well being. A lot of kids started passion projects or had little side hustles, for example, during the pandemic. So that was a positive. Mostly, it seems like kids report that they like being online because it's fun. They get to connect with their friends, they get to play games or watch funny videos, they like to listen to music, learn new things, they like to have fun. Some kids find their only solace is online. As I mentioned, we know that some children, they don't feel supported offline, maybe at their school, they don't feel they belong, or in their families, if they're in unsupportive families or unsupportive school settings. Um, they may find their support structure is online. And we know that's true for a lot of LGBTQ kids. So that's a benefit. And then we know there are some risks. First and foremost, we know how we can all waste time on our phones and being online. So it is pulling away from something else you could be doing. And most often that is displacing something healthy. So we could be doing whatever we could be doing instead of looking at the phone, might be being outside, getting fresh air, seeing green things is important, connecting with friends in person, exercising, sleeping, all of the bedrock activities that foster good mental health. They can be displaced. Um, and when these basics are displaced by screen time, that's when some red flags are hoisted. A big um, a big concern for a lot of parents is around social comparison and the body image and self-esteem issues that it may bring up. um, it can amount to a lot of digital stress, especially true for teens who are in the process of developing their self image and their bodies are changing. So they can be particularly susceptible to these unhealthy comparisons. There are also privacy and data concerns. What age limits exist online can easily be overcome by kids by just putting in a different birth date. That's all it takes sometimes. There's also a world of inappropriate content on the internet, as we know, and kids can access it. Yeah, there are not a lot of guardrails to preventing them from guardrails built into these products that would prevent kids. So we really have to be mindful of setting up privacy and content filters because there are violent videos, there is porn, there's extremist ideology and hate speech, and so we have to be careful to set up those parameters. And this kind of content can lead to divisiveness, it can lead to discrimination and harassment um, and cyberbullying. So there are real risks of cyberbullying, and we know that that can spill over into in-person bullying for kids who may be experiencing this with peers that attend the same school as they do. So that may feel overwhelming, but remember, those are risks. They're not guarantees. Another thing I try to remind myself often of is the fact that many kids have figured out how to live a balanced life with their smartphone. Um, And one of our partners has put together a really nice video series on healthy media habits. It makes it very approachable, and I think they're just a really, really high quality videos that are accessible and help break down what are the guardrails that families and parents and supportive adults can put in place around media use. This video series is included in the resource documents that Karen's going to be sharing with everybody. But the videos cover little ones under the age of 5. They cover all the media risks and rewards, choosing high quality media for children, a whole bunch of areas. And I feel that the message in short is just that adults should balance screen time and pick good content. And very important to talk to their older kids, especially about the content they're seeing online. When you have younger kids, you should be co-viewing and experiencing the media with your child and having a dialogue with younger children. As your children get older, they are going to spend time on screens without you, and you want to make sure that those open lines of communication are present. And so, in other words, we need to connect with kids, and connecting with kids is really, in this case, protecting kids. We also want to keep in mind that there is a lot of work being done in schools, a lot of good work to help students understand and manage their digital lives. Schools are teaching digital literacy, they're teaching life skills like stress management and conflict resolution, and they're helping kids work through social media drama that comes with them to school and comes back and forth. It doesn't stay in one place. So, families and schools really should be close partners on this issue. We will be touching a little bit about on the topic of phone policies later in the meeting. But this is just a reminder that in addition to that, um, after school programs, your K-12 education, community programs, they all have an important role to play. And a lot of them are already doing really good work around digital literacy and helping kids learn how to balance that portion of their life. Um, so I'm going to end here on the 10 things you could do. And I just have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to probably breeze through this list fairly quickly. But again, we've included a bunch of resources for you in the meeting materials, and you'll receive those. But it's really important to create a family media plan that is tailored to the age of your children. This is an evolving document and agreement that includes the input of your kids, and it also includes the parent and caregivers. They also are part of the family, and so they have to have their own guidelines for healthy media use. So we know that research shows any limit that is put on screen time and um, digital use for kids is better. It has an effect. In some cases, kids have said, I wish my parents had given me some rules or something more. So any limits in place will have an effect and will be helpful. But we suggest what many experts recommend, which is creating a family media plan together. And there's a template from the American Academy of Pediatrics that you can use. So it's already pre-made. Um, it's important to connect with your kids. We talked about that. And one way to do that is by just asking questions and being curious, trying to be no trying to talk without any judgment and just asking questions, like what's your favorite app? What do you like about this? Who's your favorite YouTuber? Can you show me the best video you saw on TikTok today? What's the funniest picture on your phone? Like really approaching it from a place of curiosity and fun can open those doors. We really need to be good listeners, be open and curious, and take seriously what kids say. It's also important to engage in media together, whether it's watching a TV show, a cartoon with your little one, movies together, and having dialogue about that. Um, it's it's something that I've had in my family's Friday night movie night. I think a lot of families do that, and so that's a fun opportunity to maybe plant some seeds and have conversations about heavier topics later. Uh, We really need to utilize those parent controls. Experts recommend turning off location data services, and making sure that you scaffold those controls as your kiddos age. Um, you want to make sure that your child knows what to do if they do need help, or if they see that their friend needs help, if they're online or they're getting messages from a friend that shows they're in trouble. We really need to teach our kids there are places to go for help, and hopefully that's a parent, caregiver, trusted adult at school or in the community. We know that boys are more prone to sexploitation, and it's a really big issue right now. So we want to make sure that teen boys, who 90% of the victims of sexploitation are teen boys between the ages of 14 and 17. We have a very clear idea of who is falling victim to this. And so we need to be having open conversations with boys about that, and helping them know what to do if they get into trouble, or if their friend gets into that kind of situation, what to do, who to go to. We know that girls are more prone to eating disorders, so both of these things are magnified online, and we just need to make sure that they know that they can turn to an adult for help. Um, Number 7 is just curate your feed, making sure you're viewing content that is positive and uplifting as much as possible. And in making sure that you don't accept any messages from someone you don't know IRL. If you don't know what IRL is, you need to move to step number 8, which is understand the lingo and icons. IRL means in real life. And in our resources, we have guides to emojis and icons and teen lingo that's used online. So all need that decoding for us. So there's a whole world of texting language and symbols, and some of them are shorthand for taboo topics that would normally be censored, and again raise red flags. So just be aware of what those are, so that you understand what's being talked about when you are checking it with your child. You want to establish screen time limits, of course. By ages, 0 to 2 is extremely limited, and then there are recommendations for ages 2 to 5 to limit it to an hour a day. Maybe it's a video chat, two-way video chat with a grandparent, or maybe it's co-viewing a cartoon or a Sesame Street type program, and it builds from there. So there are many recommendations about how much screen time, and a really hard rule that we're hearing more and more from experts is that absolutely do not have screens in your child's bedroom at night. So if there's one thing that can help improve their sleep quality, and hopefully prevent some of the risks of being online, is just removing the device from bedrooms at night. And always remember that time online is replacing time offline. And the time offline could be doing something, um, more healthy. I see I went over my time limit. Time limit. I'm so sorry, and I'm just gonna pause and take a drink. And Karen's gonna introduce our panel.
Awesome. Amy, as always, thank you so much for all this tremendous and important data that you share with us. Well, I am really pleased to introduce our next part of this meeting, and you can see our lovely young ladies are all ready to go. We have Avery Baxter, Lily Rue, and Rebecca Schwartzman. They are high school students from Kohler High School in Wisconsin, and now we're going to turn it back over to Amy for a discussion with the girls.
Thank you so much, Karen. Well, good morning, ladies. I'm so happy to see you. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So we were talking about some of the pros and cons to social media and tech use, but we really want to hear from youth. And we want to start with the pros. So can you tell us, what do you like about social media? What are the positives that you get out of it? And like what are your favorite parts of it?
Yeah, I can start this off. I think that really being able to keep in touch with friends is my favorite thing about social media. Like for example, I studied abroad this summer and I met kids from all over the country and I've been able to stay in touch with them through social media, and that really would have kind of been cut off if I hadn't, had social media and had, my phone to connect with all the friends that I met over the summer. So I think that's something that I really think is valuable for a lot of children, is to meet all of these people from different backgrounds, especially coming from a small town. It was really interesting to meet all of these kids and stay in touch with kids that are from completely different areas, and it's a new experience.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I agree with that too. And just the biggest part, I think, for me is just being able to connect, because a lot of times, sometimes you won't get to see everyone in a day at school. And if you don't have many classes with someone, you're still able to connect through chatting with them online.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. I think my favorite part of social media is gaining new perspectives that I otherwise wouldn't get. Like, obviously we have books, we have magazines, we have all of this that gives us a breadth of knowledge, but without social media, how can you see what's going on all around the world, the news, see pop culture? It's a culmination of our society currently.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really didn't think about any of those things before you said it, so I'm really glad. Um, so do you think that social media is a key connection point for kids, or is it, it's not unique to your examples? Do you feel like other students and your peers feel the same way, that it's really a positive way to keep in touch?
I think definitely. I think that's kind of a universal thing among teenagers at this time, is that it's like the way to connect and the way to make friends is through social media and through our phones. So yeah, I think that's pretty universal.
Yeah. And I think you said earlier, Amy, too, about how we can't really just leave social media behind because it's something that's continuously evolving. So I think it's all about us adapting to it, and we have to do what we can to make it safe and fun at the same time.
Yeah, and as technology has continued to evolve since the first computers and everything, people have begun to use social media as the main way to connect. It started in chat rooms, and it went to Facebook, and now it's Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and it's the main way people of our generation connect and make connections to each other.
Right, right. Well, I alluded to this earlier, that there's a lot of debate around when kids should have a smartphone, and when they should have access to social media. So what do you think? Is there a right time for kids to be on social media, or is there a good age or a grade that in particular stands out to you?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this one. I think having children under the age of 13 can really harm their social and emotional development. And although there is no set in stone age where kids should get their media, like people mature at different ages, people grow at different times. But really, you shouldn't have children who can't tie their own shoes, who can't, walk themselves to school. Those people shouldn't be allowed to have social media. And if you as a parent are allowing them to, it is your ethical duty to your child and the community to control what they're doing, to educate them on safety on the internet, because in the end it comes back to you. It comes back to you.
Thank you. In the beginning, it was hard to hear the first part, just I think the microphone's a little far away or fading in and out. But did you say children less than 13, under the age of 13?
Yeah, I'd say once you hit those teenage years, you begin to mature and grow as a person. But before then, you're still a child.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So what do you think are the ways that social media is problematic for your, maybe your current life, your age and grade, in the teens in your school? Are you seeing teens really struggle in this area? Or do you have maybe an example from your life where it was a problem, and what happened? How did you overcome it?
Yeah. So personally for me, I have a story about this. During COVID, I developed anorexia.
I'm going to break in here and say I really just can't hear you. Can you somehow get closer to the mic?
Let's see. Definitely pull it closer.
Okay, thank you.
I think the issue is the two on the outside. So maybe just lean it,
Yes.
lean in, or thank you.
Yeah, I think social media can definitely be problematic Is that better?
It's a little better.
Okay. Because there's a lot of unrealistic standards that social media promotes, specifically for like I've experienced this as a young girl on social media. Developed pretty bad anxiety and depression. I think due to social media, kind of my TikTok feed became curated with what bodies should look like, and diet plans and workout plans, and just my entire feed became sort of surrounded with eating disorder kind of content. And I think that really, really worsened my condition. So I think that's definitely something that is problematic and needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Did you have
Amy,
any
is it
other?
possible for you to summarize what was just said?
So Avery, are you able? Oh, okay.
Maybe we can shift the computer
Yeah.
to who's ever talking. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
Did
you.
you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, if you can repeat or summarize,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. So I think social media can definitely be problematic, especially for young developing minds. For me, I developed anorexia around 7th grade, and pretty severe depression. And I think it was partly due to just COVID and the isolation, but also that extra time on social media. We didn't have school. I couldn't really hang out with my friends. And so I spent a lot of time on social media, and my mental health went really downhill because of that, I think. And my whole feed on Instagram and on TikTok became curated with, content regarding eating disorders and how my body should look and what diet plans I should be going on and what exercises I should be doing, and all of these different recipes for low calorie foods. And I think that really contributed to why it got so bad and how it got so bad. So I think that really being aware of the dangers of social media, regarding to mental health issues, because there's this whole side of social media where it's like there's different kind of like sides to TikTok where you can get on the eating disorder side, you can get on this depression side, and like those are really dark places to be. And I think that parents as well as teens need to be aware that that is a really, really prominent negative that comes with social media.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so important to hear your story, and I appreciate you repeating it.
Mhm.
And do you have and how do you feel? What helped you out of that dark place? Do you
Yeah.
have suggestions for other kids?
hmm I definitely think, luckily, I was really blessed to have a good support system, and my mom really helped me. And, I got into therapy and got better from there. But I think really I had to change my feed on social media. I, stopped following all of these girls that I would compare myself to, and instead followed creators that promoted healthy body image and body positivity, more, healthy relationships with food and exercise. So I think really curating the content that you see on social media is really important, because it honestly, social media helped me recover from my eating disorder in a way, because I was able to see these creators, helping with tips and helping with things that you can think and retrain your mind to think healthily instead of unhealthily.
That's so interesting. It helped you out of the negative
Yeah.
place. Thank you so
It's
much for
so
sharing that.
difficult. Yeah, it's so hard to like, it's because there's two sides to it. So it's like there's a really bad side, but then there's also a really good side to it. So it's definitely a challenge to, it's kind of like a tightrope.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so important. And we're glad that you're so healthy and glowing. So, we just touched on, a really big important technique is to curate your feed. But do you have other recommendations of how to maintain a balanced, healthy use of, or either just even having a balanced relationship with your phone or a healthy use of social media? Are there other tips that you would share with your friends?
Yeah, I personally consider a lot of times setting screen times for myself, which you can do on your phones and for social media. And it kind of helps give me a balance that I can set it for a certain amount of hours or however long I can be on an app a day. And then once I get that notification, I'm able to make the personal choice to just stop using it for that time, because it's not like it permanently shuts it off, but I can make the choice myself to choose to do something else.
Yeah.
Can you turn the computer so we can
Yeah.
hear Rebecca? Thank you.
I also find that replacing social media with other healthy hobbies has really helped me. I'm just a person who likes a lot of different things, art, reading. And I feel like if everybody finds a couple more things that they enjoy doing and replace that time on the internet, replace scrolling on TikTok with going on a walk with your dog. Like you said, we're replacing all these things we used to do with scrolling on social media. But if we return back to those interests a little bit, like Becca said, if we set screen times, it can really help us bring back the culture that we miss.
Nice. So we hear from kids that parents are sometimes the ones with the problem, that they're having trouble managing their own screen time. And we know they didn't grow up with this amount of technology, um, especially parents of my age. There are younger parents who have different, who may have been exposed to, more technology than I was. The but I'm wondering if you have advice for parents or if you have these conversations with your own parents.
Yeah. So I actually do have young parents. And what I would say to all the parents who are watching this is just stop your double standards with your children. A lot of parents reprimand their kids for spending too much time on their phone, scrolling on social media, but they neglect the fact that they're doing the same, if not more. So my advice to parents is tonight, go through your screen time, see what choices you make online and see if they align with what you're speaking about. See if they align with your values. And if they're not, you need to realign yourself and get back to what you love doing.
And do you have other tips for parents? Do you show your parents how to set screen time alerts or are you showing them this is how I manage it and you're really in the teaching role?
I find it interesting how you said earlier too about sharing media, parents and kids just kind of watching it together. So personally, me and my mom, especially like to watch TikToks together, or laugh about the same videos on the internet, or even my dad as well, like watching music videos, stuff like that. So I think sharing it gives you that balance to show what the extent is of it really.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you ladies can see the chat, but there is just so much love
Yeah.
in the chat for you
Yeah.
all. Um, so we only have a few minutes left. I just want to ask you what your thoughts are, what your opinions are about cell phones at school, and maybe how you personally manage it. What like maybe you can talk about what your school's policy is in particular.
Yeah, so at Kohler, we are allowed to carry our phones with us throughout the day. We just cannot have them out out during class. If the teacher allows it during class, if for like maybe we're working on a project or we need our phones for to take a picture or record a voice audio, we can use our phones then. And we can also use our phones during lunchtime and study halls. But then other than that, it should be put away in the backpacks. And if it becomes an issue, there are consequences for it. And I appreciate this policy. I think it's pretty good. I have heard of schools that completely take the phone away during lunch and during study halls. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's really important, especially for high school students. I think middle school it's a little hard because you're still, growing and developing. But high schoolers, I think it's important that they learn time management skills. So if they're on their phone during their study hall, they're wasting their own time to do homework, and that's a natural consequence that they're going to face is maybe they're getting bad grades or they're have to do their homework when they're at home and they would rather do something else. It's a natural consequence, and that I think helps kids learn that time management and learn how to prioritize certain tasks over other things.
Mhm.
I have a similar take on our cell phone policy. I think it is pretty reasonable for kids our age, especially high school level, that it shouldn't be too open where you're just able to utilize it as much as you want, because I think some kids might not have enough self-control to put their studies first. But I do think being able to use it in certain times is really helpful, especially there's a lot of things that students need to connect during the school day and talk about, different projects and things we're working on. So I think it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I also agree. I think our social media policy is very beneficial to the students, but also the teachers, because typically when phones are allowed just freely in class, the attention wavers from the board to the screen, and teachers find it harder to teach, harder to get their points across, and harder to get the students to pass and go on to whatever they want to do. So having the limited phone usage that we do in class is really beneficial, I believe, because as we've evolved as a world into more technology and made it a center of our learning, it's become more important to have our phones to be able to, like Becca said, record stuff for classes. To one of our teachers has a barcode to sign out. Like technology has become a part of the classroom. And I feel like taking that away fully, it hurts us more than helps us.
Thank you so much. It was amazing to hear you have very nuanced views and are so articulate, and we appreciate you, especially moving through the audio there in the beginning. But there's just so much gratitude for you in the chat, and I want to echo the same thing. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being MHA ambassadors. I'm sure you all have such a great future ahead of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I will just thank you to extend my thanks to you for leaving school class time to do this. And we appreciate Kohler for letting you do that. So everybody on the call, let's take 3 minutes and come back, and then we will move forward with Tina Crave. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to welcome everybody back. I think it might be a little ahead of 10:55 right now, but it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our keynote for today, who is Tina Crave. And Tina is developing quite an expertise on this topic of social media and children's mental health. And we look so forward to what you're going to share with us today, Tina. So please take it away.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm here representing a partnership of more than 50 agencies across Dodge and Jefferson counties called Every Child Thrives. And this group of partners has been working together for about 8 years to improve the outcomes of young children and families. We use a system change approach that focuses on prevention and addressing root causes. And what that means is that we get all the sectors of the community together around a table. We prioritize just a few shared goals, and then we align the limited resources of all of our organizations to really get things done. And the topics of healthy minds, and emotional well-being for youth are really important to me personally. Our young people have such exciting lives ahead of them. They're our future, and we need them to be strong and brave. We need them to innovate to solve some of the really complex challenges that our world is dealing with. And so when I see data that show that, 60% of the middle school girls in our community are feeling hopeless, or that members of Generation Z, the newest and the freshest members of our workforce, are the least engaged and the most likely to be happy at work. By the way, with only 1 in 4 reporting that they have excellent mental health, it's clear to me that we as a society need to find a better path forward. And while expanding access to mental health treatment has to be a priority, we're not going to treat our way out of unprecedented rates of youth loneliness and anxiety. I really think that some of our societal norms are out of whack. And, I'm so passionate about this that I made a change personally in this past year, stepping down from my role as CEO of the foundation, going back to school in my free time. And I'm excited to dedicate the rest of my career to really restoring the practices and habits that help each of us live to our full potential. So we like to use this garden analogy as we think about youth well-being, because it's really our job as adults to provide the environments at home, at school, and in the community that give our children the conditions and the experiences they need to grow up to be thriving adults. So given the data Amy just shared, it doesn't seem like we're successfully nurturing the environment children need to thrive. And when I plant my garden and my plants don't thrive, which happens way too often, do I blame the seed that, hey, there's something wrong with that seed? Or do I double check and see if my plants are receiving the protective factors they need, like sun and water and good soil? Or do I perhaps double check, am I appropriately protecting them from the predators, like the insects and rabbits that like to nibble on my plants? And over the last few decades, so many of our societal habits have been changed by technology in ways that are helpful, but also in ways that are creating an environment that isn't so helpful to any of us. Just some examples, most of our banking is now automated. We don't talk to a person once a week at the bank. We're having more and more self-checkout at the grocery store. And we've reduced ourselves to sending a text message to wish someone a happy birthday instead of picking up the phone or sending a card. And these changes all save us time and they provide convenience. But there's some negative ramifications that come with us. Namely, too many of us, both adults and children, are missing out on some of the protective factors that we need to thrive. And the most important one is genuine, real life human connections. Without realizing it, today's young people were a bit of a social experiment for us. They were the first generation to grow up with 24/7 access to the internet in the palm of their hands while their brains were still developing. And when the tech boom started, many of us, myself included, we advocated for children to learn tech skills early because we knew that, this was the future. And we know that, the ability to use technology is vital. But I think we're now learning that our haste to expose children to digital learning as soon as possible might not have been the best decision for them. On this slide, I share an image of Dr. Jean Twenge's book called The Generations. It's a great read, but she's really the one that fueled my passion on this topic. I had the opportunity to hear her speak at a national conference on loneliness. And until I heard that presentation, I really had no idea that of all the generations, our youngest people have the highest rates of loneliness. I had assumed it was the elderly. She shared some very powerful national and global data that showed how the habits and well-being indicators of our young people have really changed significantly over the past 2 or 3 decades. And just some examples, teens today are much less likely to have a driver's license by the time they graduate from high school. So nationally, about 63% of graduates have a driver's license. Back when I graduated, that number was closer to 90%. Teens today are less likely to have a job, and they're also less likely, in some good ways, to drink alcohol or have sex. So behaviors have really changed. But during the past 20 years, face-to-face socialization among teens has almost been cut in half. So Dr. Twangy's book is filled with charts and graphs that show the many ways our lifestyles have changed over the past 3 or 4 decades. Specifically, since about 2012, which looking back, we now know is about the time most Americans began getting their own cell phones. So I came home from that conference and I asked our team to run our local data. And that's what you're seeing here. It's the depression rates of our high school students in Dodge and Jefferson counties. And unfortunately, our data aligns perfectly with the global data. If you have access to trends on your data in your community, I encourage you to take a look to see if your trends are similar. But it's not just a change in well-being that we're looking at. This graph shows PISA scores, which is an international measure of academic achievement. And globally, scores in math, reading, and science have dropped fairly significantly over the past 15 years. There's also trends in the workplace. Within 5 years, Generation Z, so that's those that are currently under 30, they'll make up 30% of our workforce. And a study came out last month that showed their engagement is significantly lower than any of their older coworkers. And only 31% of our youngest members of the workforce say that they're holistically healthy. And that compares to 52% of baby boomers, who are older and likely have, more lack of holistic health just simply because of age. So well-being is the foundation for success in learning, in marriages, and at work. And when our young people are, by their own definition, aren't thriving. So I want to pause here and have a little bit of interaction and reflect on how society or the environment for today's youth is maybe growing up from the one that you grew up in. And so Karen's going to we're going to post this, I think, in the chat. If you can think about today's youth are the first generation to grow up with 24/7 access to the internet, in their hands. They're on screens for hours a day, and that screen time is replacing some of the real world experiences they need for their mind and body to develop into a healthy adult. Could you please go to the chat and just share what are some of those important real life experiences that are vital to help young children and adolescents grow up to be thriving adults? And we'll just see what kind of things come up. Great. I'm seeing a lot of in-person play. Amy also mentioned sleep, exercise, time in nature and outdoors have been mentioned. Something that seems perhaps counterintuitive is boredom. Boredom is good for us, and we don't allow ourselves to be bored anymore, to find something to entertain our time. So thank you for taking the time to reflect on that a bit. I think that what it comes down to is as youth are spending more time on social media and gaming, there's positives and negatives. The good news is they're not drinking drugs or having sex as often. And in fact, in our community, we've had good conversations with healthcare providers who are still making time to talk to teens about those things. And they hadn't been asking about digital habits or bullying. So that's something that's changed in our community. But the bad news is the time that our young people are spending on devices is replacing activities we absolutely need to develop relationships, problem-solving skills, communication, and self-management skills. And as you know, our former Surgeon General a couple years ago declared an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And ironically, despite the fact that technology offers, the ability for 24/7 connection, our world is lonelier and it's more polarized than ever. And at first, I think we all thought the loneliness was a result of the pandemic. But as Amy mentioned, that's not the case. All of these trends, reduced time spent with friends, more anxiety, more loneliness, they were trending in the wrong direction well before the pandemic. The pandemic just did the favor of bringing it to our attention. So just as our teens told us, I wanted to make it clear that social media in itself isn't bad. The problem, I believe, is what all of us miss out on when we spend too much time in front of a screen. There's thousands of studies that demonstrate the importance of human connection on our well-being. Scientific evidence shows that when we have, positive in-person interactions with one another, it lowers our stress hormones, raises our feel-good hormones, it helps us to learn better. And scientists now believe that social connection might be the single greatest overall determination of our health and well-being. In fact, I think it's amazing that the health risks of loneliness are 15 times more greater than that of smoking. So as we dive into a deeper conversation about our youth, I want all of us to pause for just a second and ask the question, might you, as I do, need to find ways to disconnect from technology a little bit more so that we can reconnect with others as humans? All right, so I want to take a quick poll about youth and technology to see where your thoughts are. And to start this, the science about technology is really all over the place, as are parent opinions. So we're going to ask you to reflect on three things because there's not clear answers to this. And it's really, at what age do you personally think a child is ready for their own smartphone? And that means internet-enabled smartphone. At what age are they ready for their own social media account? And at what age are they ready to have unmonitored access to the internet? I'll give you a few minutes there. As we're wrapping up this poll, I think it's important to note that nationally, parent opinions differ from age. So parents in the 30s and early 40s are much more likely to believe kids need devices earlier. And as you get, into the 50 plus age group, you are more likely to think that we should be restricting some of this. How are we doing, Karen?
I think I'm sharing the results. Can you see them?
Okay, so it's looking like at what age do you think a child is ready for their own phone? Some answers are spread out, but age 13 to 15, which really reinforces, I think, what our teens just told us. When we look to social media, we are leaning older. So I think more than half are saying age 16 plus. Again, it's interesting how the difference in opinions between the adults and the young people. And then at what age do you personally think a child is ready for unmonitored access to the internet? By far, people are saying 16. And interestingly, we purposely worded the question this way because most any child that has their own smartphone already has fairly unmonitored access to the internet. Unless the parents are significantly smarter than I was in really ensuring that good controllers are in place. All right, so thank you. Want to come back to some explanations about this. And one possible explanation might come from some of Dr. Jonathan Haidt's work. His book, The Anxious Generation, has been on the bestseller list for some time. So I think his ideas seem to be resonating. And his perspective is that as technologies become more and more woven into every minute of our lives, the conditions of child development have changed. And if we think back to our garden analogy, our plants are growing differently because the things that they need to flourish have changed. And Haidt believes that childhood used to be based on play and outdoor exploration and, independence. And now, childhood has really been based around the phone. And he suggests we might be overprotecting children in the real world and underprotecting them in the virtual world. Now, this idea of overprotecting, I think, is really thought-provoking. And what we know about child development is that young children need safe exploration and risk-taking. They need to, have progressive responsibility and independence. And we live in a world today where all of us adults perceive that there's more dangers than in the past. And many of us parents are really taking extra effort to protect our children. We might not feel that it's safe for kids to play in the front yard unsupervised or to walk alone to a friend's house. And Haidt argues that we might be overprotecting and that our attempts to ensure that our kids are safe might be robbing them of some of the exploration and risk-taking they need to learn critical thinking and problem-solving skills. So reflect a bit on, what age were you when your parents allowed you to have independence, to maybe, walk or bike to school on your own. And if you want, in the chat box, put two numbers, put your age if you're comfortable, and then the age that your parents allowed you to independently walk to school. What national research shows is the older you are, the younger you were when you had some freedoms like walking to school or walking to your friend's house. And the younger you are, the more likely you were to grow up with more protections. All right, thank you for that. A national statistic, in 1969, almost half of kids walked or biked to school every day. And by 2009, just 13% are doing so. And that's the latest number I could find. Then there's this idea of underprotecting, and our youth today really talked about this. Just as I need to protect my garden from the rabbits that love my lettuce, a healthy society puts boundaries in place that protects children from known harms. And if you think about that, we don't allow children to have a driver's license before age 16. They don't get to go to R-rated movies before 18. They're required to wear seatbelts and bike helmets. And while we probably didn't like some of these guidelines when they were first introduced, these protections over the years have saved millions of lives. And so while we take lots of protection in the real world to protect our kids, it's much more difficult to do so online. Online, they can talk to strangers, they can have access to R-rated content, they can figure out how to gamble. They can bully other kids and be bullied, sometimes with really devastating consequences. And as we've talked about several times this morning, the real problem is what we're missing out on. And the research shows that our kids are sleep deprived. They're deprived of good social interactions. Our attention is fragmented. And then there's this idea of addictions. And our young people that shared their stories talked about how their feed was curated by the algorithms that the tech companies utilize. One, to hook us, and two, to feed us content that they want us to see. And I'm sure, like you, there's times when I'll read a news article that might take a particular slant on a topic, and then more and more and more I see that slant being reinforced. And it takes every ounce of adult critical thinking that I have to be objective about the content I'm seeing and not let it lead me. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on how the social media algorithms work. I want to better understand that. And I think we all need to. If we're going to be giving our children unmonitored access to content, we need to know a little bit more about where it comes from. And so on this next slide, there's a book that just came out called Careless People, written by Sarah Wynne Williams. She's a former executive of Facebook. And you can read the quote, but essentially, Facebook was offering advertisers the opportunity to target teenage girls during moments of psychological vulnerability when they had expressed that they were feeling worthless, insecure, stressed, or like a failure. It essentially targeted them when they're worried about their bodies and thinking about losing weight, or basically targeting teens in a fragile emotional state. And I saw this and it just made me sick. You think about when your child is feeling sad or anxious or nervous, what do they need most? And it most certainly is not to have advertisers prey on them. So this begs the question, whose responsibility is it to protect our children from profit-driven companies who prey on them during their vulnerable moments? What's our role as parents? What's the role of the technology companies? And what's the role of our state and federal governments in ensuring or helping our parents ensure that our children are safe? I want to think back in 1969, the US Surgeon General issued a warning that smoking causes cancer. Before that, we didn't necessarily know that. And over the course of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, of course, parents had conversation with their children about smoking, but governments progressively took more and more action through legislation to protect citizens and to change the societal norms around smoking. Ultimately, it was a ban on indoor smoking that really led to long-term changes and improved health for all of us. And so I do believe that one of our paths forward is critical conversations about the role of technology companies in being accountable for also protecting the well-being of our children. So let's think about, how did we get here? Because things changed really fast over a period of less than 20 years. And those of you that are my age can remember well before 2000, we had dial-up internet, which was, slower than molasses and not something we, cared to spend too much time on. But broadband or faster speed internet became available in about 2000. And 7 years later, the iPhone was introduced. And the smartphone and constant access to the internet really started to change the way we live. Social media came about just 2 years later, and the front-facing camera a year after that. And the concept of that fresh front-facing camera is interesting in itself, in that it fueled so much more of a focus on ourselves and an internal focus, rather than one that had traditionally been on others. By 2011, 23% of teens own their own smartphone, and in less than 5 years, almost 80% of teens and 30% of children age 8 to 12 had their own phone and constant access to whatever's on the internet. Today, estimates all differ, but the average child spends 6 to 8 hours a day on their phone. And that's 6 to 8 hours a day that they're missing out on some critical developmental opportunities. So we're going to take another quick poll here and reflect on, am I a good role model? So do you find times when you catch yourself checking your phone when you should be doing something else, like giving another person your full undivided attention?
Okay, it looks like the activity has stopped, so I'll end the poll and share the results.
Okay. Thank you. Sounds like we have some nice, genuine responses, and I'm right up there with you. And just to share some national research, 31% of parents admit that they're sometimes distracted when they should be interacting with their children. Half of teens say that their parents are. So there's a big gap between parent perception and teens. The next slide that I have here is a slide from the Harvard Center for Digital Wellbeing. And I just love their quote because this just describes the balance that we have. Technology is both helpful and harmful. It's energizing and exhausting. It's connecting and dividing. It's really multifaceted, so our approach to it needs to be too. And the right amount of and type of technology will be different for each of one of us. And so I really think the fundamental question for each of us to ask and to help our children ask is, in what ways are my digital habits helping me to be my best self? And in what ways are they preventing me from being my best self? Research acknowledges that social media is both problematic and protective. So studies find that adolescents are happier when they have at least a few hours a week of social media. But averages can get us in trouble. So research has shown that about a third of the children flourish online, while a 24% really suffer. So I think it's really a third are doing fine, a third are suffering, a third are somewhere in the middle. And social media can be a protective factor for certain groups, particularly transgender and non-binary adolescents who find that sense of support online. And researchers are starting to find that the divide between those that are thriving and those that are languishing appears to be influenced by their baseline mental health, socioeconomic status, and family dynamics. And I guess it makes sense that the children with stable, supportive relationships in their lives have brains that are, more readily prepared to handle the stressors and the temptations and sometimes the rejection that comes with social media. They often have one other thing, and that's like a purpose in life. And some pretty cool research shows that when teens have a sense of purpose, they're much more likely to show addictive social media behaviors. And as our teens today suggested, they're finding self-control is really the most important variable. And it's important to remember that self-control is in the frontal lobe of your brain, and it's a skill set that doesn't finish developing until age 25. But self-control is really a primary determinant of whether or not one thrives in the digital world. And one final piece that I think Amy also talked about is the question is really, how is social media being used? So social media is very helpful for maintaining social relationships, and that can boost our well-being. Research is finding it's not so helpful for trying to start friendships. That can lead to a lot more feelings of rejection because it's hard to start a friendship online. And most importantly, I think we're starting to find that passive scrolling and video watching are the most problematic and addictive. And Amy showed a slide earlier that showed what platforms teens are on, and YouTube and TikTok were the top two. And I think for the most part, those are passive scrolling and video watching. So definitely something we should be talking to our youth about. So back to the theory of change here. John Haidt, his theory of change really says that we should roll back the phone-based childhood and get children out playing and exploring more, restore the play-based childhood, and reclaim life in the real world. I think we all would naturally agree with that. We want our children to have more real-life experiences, but the devil's in the detail. And so we're going to go to the next slide where we think a little bit about what that means. And Haidt's recommendation are that, young children have a bit more free and risky play within safe tolerance, that youth not access social media until age 16. And he's also advocating for phone-free schools bell to bell. So that means all day, really thinking that we need to give our kids the gift of 7 hours free of social media drama and giving them back the lunch hours where they get to socialize and enjoy each other. And so we want to put a poll up here, I believe, to see now that, these are the official recommendations of one expert. How are you all feeling about that? So there's a poll here that says, how much do I agree or disagree with the recommendation of kids should have more free and risky play? How much do I agree or disagree of no social media before age 16? And then how much would I support a bell-to-bell phone-free school policy?
I'm still seeing a little activity, so I'm going to hang in there a second. Okay, looks like things have slowed down, so I'll end it and I'll share the results.
Okay, so it looks like most of us agree that kids should have more free and risky play. And as someone trying to lead community change, this is one I'd love to have more dialogue on. How do we encourage that? It's really quite a topic to talk to parents about. But I think it's one just having more conversations and helping us think critically about, how unsafe is our world? And can our kids walk to school or can I send them into the grocery store to run an errand so they get some of those early life experiences? No social media before age 16. This one is split pretty evenly. And then the idea about phone-free schools, I would say that is also split. An interesting national data on that, when they ask about phone-free schools, parents that are age 30 or younger, 45% of them support a phone-free school. And you get over age 50, 80% support. So it's again, if you grew up in a world where you didn't have technology, you think, well, everyone should be able to do fine without having it. And if you grew up with the technology, you're less likely to think that. So as we wrap up here, in our community, we talk about the 3 Ps that we all need to thrive. We all need people to support us. We need places where we belong and we feel like we matter. And we need a purpose to wake up for every single morning. And as I wrap up, I'd like each of us to reflect on the steps we might take to ensure everyone in our life has the people, places, and purpose they need. And so let's think about how we might impact 3 audiences. And the first one I want us to think about is ourselves. So what opportunities exist for me to disconnect so I can reconnect with others and be a role model for our children? Next, let's think about our children. How can I ensure that my children enjoy the real life experiences that they need to become healthy adults? What can we do in our homes, in our schools, in our communities? And that might be things like tech-free times or zones. In my family, there's no phones allowed at dinner. I've had to take my kids' phones away when we go visit grandma, because we're going to visit grandma to visit grandma. And we all put our phones in the kitchen overnight. But what other places in the community might we do that? And I think the other thing that, and Amy reinforced this as well, is talking to our kids. So what opportunities do I have to discuss this, to learn where my children are at, to learn more about what they're seeing online, and to create this receptivity to come and talk when there's something out of whack that they're not comfortable with. And then the third group I'd like us to think about is, what can I do for my state, my country, and my world. So, what policies and practices in our communities might better support youth well being? And so I think about phone free places. Someone was just telling me about a restaurant that is phone free. How awesome is that? But should our schools, our churches, after school programs, movie theaters, should we have more phone free places so we have time dedicated to get away and interact with one another? How do we give our children more accessible opportunities to enjoy play, to enjoy the great outdoors and other real life activities together? And finally, perhaps most challenging, is there something that each one of us can do to help create a world where technology companies have some accountability for the well-being of our youth? As we wrap up, I'd like to ask if any of your communities might be interested in collaborating on this topic. We in Dodge and Jefferson County love to collaborate because we think we can help nudge statewide alignment to raise awareness on this topic, to have conversation about what children need to thrive with the people who can actually influence a better future, and to learn more about what regular people like us might do to ensure our technology companies have a role moving forward. I don't think it's necessary for any of us to recreate the wheel. And I know that, education and awareness activities will be much more effective if we line and we have a shared message. So I have my email address on this slide. And if you or anyone from your community would be interested in a collaboration on how we might, or a conversation on how we might learn or collaborate together, please reach out. And with that, I want to end with this quote from the US Surgeon General, the former US Surgeon General. Together, we can build a community that is healthier, more resilient, less lonely, and more connected. Thank you so very much for being here and for caring about this important topic.
Tina,
Great.
thank you
Tina,
so
oh,
much.
go ahead, Amy. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Karen. There were a couple of questions that we received, and I want to start with the question around purpose. So, somebody in the chat asked if you could elaborate or possibly rephrase your comment about kids needing purpose. Was it purpose that they needed to have going online or in real life?
In real life. And it's often described as a reason to get up in the morning, something that I'm passionate about, a way to recognize that I have talents and I can use my talents. And, our most active kids have purpose. They're in athletics or forensics, or they have a job that they like. But there's a lot of children that don't have that, and they're not sure what they're good at. And they perhaps don't have adults in their life that tell them what they're good at and help them understand that they can be anything that they want to be. And so it's really that idea of having a life purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. That's so important.
Perfect. Thank you, Tina. We also have a question about what your thoughts are related to school safety and phones in school, given the increase in violence in schools.
That is a great question, and I've heard that loud and clear from, I would say, most parents in our community, and the Pew data show that is, unfortunately, it's likely that something bad could happen, and we want to be able to get a hold of our children. Law enforcement will tell us that they would prefer the children not be on their phone in an emergency because they should be listening to the teacher for directions. So I am hearing that that's where parents are at. I understand it, but I think it'll be something we have to look at critically.
Right. We've also explored this topic a bit, and law enforcement is pretty clear about that being really could be detrimental to the clearing a situation. but also there are some schools that have found ways to communicate during an emergency. And in some cases, I know they've put landlines back into classrooms so that there is a phone that the teacher can access. And so anyway, it is an ongoing conversation because it sounds like there are competing interests there. So do you, we talked a little bit about the age of parents, and the question is really, do you see differences, a lot of differences in how parents of different ages feel about social media and maybe their confidence to manage their kids' social media?
Absolutely. And this was humbling because I figured out I'm old. And that I think most parents that have children in K-12 have a different belief. Anyone that grew up with pretty constant access to technology doesn't know any other way. And I grew up not having access to technology. So that's the only childhood that I know. And so that is definitely a difference that we need to honor and respect. And I really think it's important for us as the adults in the room to ask ourselves, is my phone use benefiting me or hurting me? And how is it influencing my child?
Thank you. Also, you had mentioned your community conversations and collaborations, and the question is, what has surprised you during those conversations?
What surprised me is that the kids held up their phones and said, "This gives us brain rot." And then about 6 months later, I read that the word brain rot was like identified as the word of the year for one of the dictionaries. Like it is a new thing, and it's a way young people are talking about their relationship with technology. So it's good and it's bad, and they understand that. I think the other thing that surprises me is the idea of whose role is it to have these conversations? Obviously, it's parents' role to talk to their kids, but whose role is it to talk to parents? Schools have so many things to communicate, from how you read to what the schedule is next week. What's the role of healthcare providers? What's the role of the faith community? What's the role of our after school programs? We're all trying to figure it out, and there isn't one sector of society that's leading this. So we need all of us to work together and have, safe conversations about what a better balance and more digital well-being might look like.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of the slides you shared, all of the information. I tried to keep the chat full of those resource links to the books that you discussed and some of the research you shared. And we just want to extend your thanks. It was really wonderful presentation. Everyone will get those resources and slides later after the meeting. And just a big thanks to you, Tina, for the work you're doing and for being here today.
Thank you all for being here.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Tina. I'll also extend my thank yous to on behalf of everyone in this space. And now we cannot have this conversation without the next topic. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Linda Hall, who will introduce our next speaker.
Yes, wonderful presentation from one of our network partners who's been with us on this journey. Really nice to have that leadership rising up from our network. So social media and cell phones are really hard to separate. And we can't really have this discussion on social media without talking about cell phones. And we wanted to dedicate some of our time this morning to this, especially around cell phones at school. Kids spend the largest part of their day during the school year at school. And we all know the distractions that cell phones can pose. We've heard about it from our speakers this morning. Many of us have seen it. And we also know how hard it is for youth as well as adults to keep away from their phones. So schools realizing this have, in many cases, some sort of technology policy that includes when students can use their cell phones. With the limited time we have remaining in our meeting, we want to hear from a school that has an away for the day policy. And we have with us Kayla Strawman, who is the Dean of Students at Glacier Creek Middle School in Middleton, Wisconsin. And Kayla's going to share with us some of their school's experience in terms of developing and implementing and evolving their school cell phone policy. So Kayla, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I've been
Really?
away from school for a couple of days, and it's just nice to get back into the world of kids.
Great. So Kayla, tell us, what is your cell phone policy at Glacier Middle School?
Yeah, so our cell phone policy actually kind of falls under a personal technology policy. We first rolled out a specific cell phone policy just after COVID in the 2021-22 school year. And as we have been rolling it out, we've been noticing, oh, we actually do need to include smartwatches with that. Those cause distraction. Oh, we need to include iPads in that. And so we have a technology policy that kind of encompasses all personal tech. And the policy is that students cannot use their personal technology from 8 a.m. when the school doors open until 3:36 when the last bell rings. That does allow them to use their technology after school, to arrange for after school rides or to communicate with families. This applies to hallways, lunchtime, in the classrooms, definitely in the bathrooms. That's actually one of the state law. We can't use our recording devices in places like bathrooms or locker rooms for personal safety reasons. I mean, in the case of inclement weather and things like that, they can use their school issued devices during lunchtime because they can't run around. And so if they want to play a game with a friend or play chess, they can use technology then, but we really don't have students use personal technology throughout the day.
Well, thanks, Kayla. The volume of your sound is going up and down a little. I don't know if that's what's happening at my end. So
that's okay, I can change. Let me try a different microphone.
Oh, okay. We could hear you, but at some points it would just get louder.
Is this a better microphone? Does that seem?
I'm looking at my partners here.
No.
No, that one's not better because it's a little muffled. No.
So my advice, Kayla, is just to try, because you're moving around a lot. So maybe just try to hold your head still. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's good. I can do that.
So, Kayla, I have a follow-up question for you. When you've identified all the ways that kids should not have their cell phones out, do you collect cell phones at the beginning of the day? That's the first question I always get asked. Where do these cell phones go?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do not take them away from children. We trust, so our school is grades 5 through 8. So we have 10-year-olds through 14-year-olds. And we trust that once we have taught them the expectations, they will follow those expectations. And so they have them on their person or in their backpacks the whole day. And we just trust that they're going to make the right choice. If they don't make the right choice, we have a progressive model in which we respond to them. So if they, are texting or playing on their phone one time, we give them a warning. If they do it a second time, we have them put it into the office for the day. If they do it a third time, their parent or guardian will come pick it up. And obviously, if there are extenuating circumstances, we work individually with people. So yeah, they can have them on them, which I think alleviates some of the concern for families that if there were some kind of event or something traumatic happening at the school, they can still reach their children in those cases. But in general, those are off and away.
And do your teachers feel that this is working pretty well? We've heard multiple times that teachers don't want to be the police around cell phones.
Yeah, so our teachers really like our policy because when students, you know, break the policy, the only role that teachers have is to denote that they have seen a child use technology appropriately, and then all of the follow-up response comes from the main office. So we will reach out to home, we will confer with families, we will confer with students, and then we'll follow up with the teachers. So our teachers appreciate that it's not another thing on their plate. They just need to let us know that it has happened and we follow up.
So there's good coordination between teachers and the administration to make sure that the policy is being followed.
Yes, and that took a little time to build. When we first rolled out our technology policy, we surveyed staff to see if they would even want a personal technology policy like this. And staff pretty overwhelmingly said that they want a policy like this because it alleviates pitting teacher against teacher. So if one teacher allows cell phones and another teacher doesn't, students feel that that is unfair, and then there's a lot of kind of animosity there. And so when we were rolling it out, teachers said, we want a strong technology policy and we want it to be consistent across the building so that it's not one teacher allows this, one teacher allows this.
So can you speak a little bit more about the gradual implementation of your policy, where you got to, and what you thought were the most significant steps along the way?
Yeah, so our school district has left technology policies up to school buildings since technology became a major thing in schools, and that is still the case. So school buildings in Milton can create their own policy. The expectation now is that schools have a policy. That had not been an expectation, but as personal tech becomes more prevalent, the district really wanted something specific for each school building. So what we did was over the year that we were home, or the half of the year that we were home in 2020, we surveyed staff and asked them what are the most important components of a technology policy. And so we initially allowed phones and headphones and all of this kind of personal technology. We left it up to the teacher discretion. So that was our first initial rollout. We said we can't have personal tech in the hallways or in bathrooms or in locker rooms, but if the teacher gives you permission in the classroom, that's fine. And then the next year, the teachers came back to us and said, "Oh, we actually don't like that. That made things harder for us." And so we said, okay, teachers can authorize music on phones, but during work time, but that's the only thing that we want you to authorize. Don't let them do anything else. That didn't really work either, because then, it's hard to monitor. It's hard to be the police of that. And so this year we said, if you want to listen to music during work time, that's okay. We're going to use our school issued devices. We're going to keep our phones off and away all day. No one's going to give you permission to use them. That's kind of the end all be all. Obviously, this comes with individualized plans for students who may have great anxiety being away from a parent. Parents who have great anxiety disconnected from their child. And so we have individualized plans for students in those cases. But in the grand scheme of things, students do not access their personal technology during the day. And if they do need to, they know they can come to the main office or to our student services department, and we'll authorize them to text home or call mom or, do whatever they need to do.
Great. So learning, a little trial and error, some learning along the way, and some refinements that are really working for everybody, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So I see there's a question in the chat on whether the high school has the same policy.
That's a great question. The policy is a little bit different at the high school. And, I think considering the developmental differences between preteens and teenagers and adults at the high school, I think, that definitely needs to be taken into consideration. The high school policy is that students are not allowed to be on their phones during instructional time. So from the first bell of, whatever class they're in to the end of that class, no technology, but in the hallways, at lunch, on their off periods, they can use their technology then.
Okay, very good. So in the time we have left, we'd really like to hear from you about, what are the results you've seen from implementing this policy?
Yeah, so I pulled some of our data. I have some quantitative data, but then I also have some like anecdotal data. Since we launched the policy, our phone infractions specifically have gone down. So in last year, for example, our 8th graders had 258 infractions. That doesn't mean all of the students broke the policy. It could be one student broke the policy 10 times. So the number of infractions was 258. This year, although the year has not ended, we are at 174. So we're seeing fewer and fewer students like violating the policy, basically, which is wonderful. We're also getting really positive anecdotal support from students and from staff. Our students tell us they feel like they can focus more in classrooms. They feel less anxiety about other students taking pictures or videotaping them during class or in the hallways. We've had fewer social media events where something happens at school and someone takes a picture and then it goes around the school and it's this major event. We have had maybe one of those, and when we do experience those kinds of things, we also have a code of conduct that kind of backs us up in saying, taking videos at school is different than just using your phone to text your mom. Taking videos at school is actually like more harmful. And so we've seen a lot of positive feedback coming from students and from staff. We also have a lot of support from families, which has been really the game changer. Without family support, our policy would not work because it involves a high level of parental collaboration. And so that has been wonderful. I think that parents, sometimes when I make phone calls home about this kind of thing, parents will ask me, well, what should I do? My friend, my son has a phone and all of his friends have phones and they're on it until 11 p.m. and I take my sons away at 9 p.m. And so there's a lot of parental confusion out there too about, how to raise kids in this new and phone environment. And so working with parents around how to be really supportive has been really helpful too.
It's interesting. So parents are collaborating on what's the time to take away the phone. When does the phone go in the kitchen before bed?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And Kayla, have you had a chance to compare Glacier Creek to another middle school that doesn't have this policy?
That's a great question. I have not.
Okay.
We only have 2 middle schools in our school district, and both middle schools have the same policy. So I have not had a chance to compare. I have not, but that would be really interesting data.
And are you getting any feedback from the high school in terms of kids who've now experienced this policy at middle school about how they're functioning in high school?
That's a really great question. So from our perspective, from when we started it, this year's 8th grade group is the first group that had access to technology prior to us putting this policy into place. And so as more and more of our 8th graders leave to the high school, fewer groups of them will have had access to their phones. So it is more natural or maybe more understood that phones stay away at school. And so we're seeing a decrease in infractions. Our high school, partners have not had a group of kids that this policy has been their policy the entire time they've been in middle school. However, I would anticipate that as these groups of kids go to the high school, that transition will be a little bit easier. But I do work closely with our dean, so I'll have to see if I can get some actual data around that, because I would imagine that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. Can I answer that question?
Yes, go ahead.
That is a great question, Tracy. For the most part, adults also follow the policy in the school building. So our expectation for me as a dean, for our teachers, for our support staff, is that our phones and our personal tech are off and away. Obviously, adults have greater responsibilities for their own children, or they may be checking their email on their phone and things like that. And so in those cases, we just ask that people, step out of a student space to do those things. So if they're in a classroom and there's a second teacher and they can step out to take that call or to respond to that text, they'll do that. And our staff has been really supportive in that because they see that impact on kids. So for the most part, yes, but we're a little bit more flexible with the adults because the adults are also responding to things that are maybe more urgent than a Boom Beach game.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Kayla, before we wrap this up?
That's a good question. I don't think I had anything else to add, but I'm happy to answer more questions. So if more questions do pop up and you want to just see how maybe one school responds, I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming today and sharing your experience with us. We know that this is a hot topic. People are very interested in it. It's really so great for us to be able to have someone come and explain, like, this is how it's going. This is what we've learned, and this is how we're moving forward. So thank you for sharing your experience.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm happy to answer questions, so feel free to send them my way.
Thanks, Kayla. With that, I'm going to pop it back to Karen, I believe.
Hey, yes, thank you so much. And again, a hearty thank you to Kayla, Tina, and our high school young ladies have left us to go back to class. So just grateful for your contributions to our meeting today. And Amy, your brilliant data, as always, really is so foundational to this meeting. We're at time, so I will say good day to everybody. And just do know that I will send out the minutes following this, and we do have a lot of resources that are available on our website right now. If you go to the Collective Impact page and you go to the Children's Mental Health Network page, but I will also remind everybody of that in the follow-up communications too. So thank you and have a great day, everybody.